3 years. That's how long Maya Chin poured her soul into Hartwell Enterprises, enduring Alexander Hartwell's impossible standards and icy demeanor. 3 years of late nights, rejected proposals, and swallowing her pride. But when her revolutionary sustainable housing design, the project that could change millions of lives, was presented to the world with someone else's name on it, something inside her broke. Her billionaire boss didn't just steal her work. He looked her in the eye and told her to let it go. So Maya Chun, the junior architect who'd never backed down from a fight, made a decision that would shock the entire corporate world. She sued Alexander Hartwell for everything. Before we continue, if you believe in standing up for what's right, I'd be so grateful if you could take just a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also tell the city you are watching from. Your support means the world and helps us bring you more stories of courage and unexpected love. Thank you so much. What Maya couldn't have known was that at that very moment, Alexander was in his office, staring at a folder marked Maya Chun Confidential, filled with evidence that would change everything she believed about him. But it was too late. The lawsuit was filed, and the truth was about to explode. Sometimes the person you're fighting is fighting for you. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Hartwell Enterprises gleamed with the kind of luxury that only billions could buy. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline, like a painting, and around the mahogany table sat some of the most influential real estate developers in the country. Maya Chin had dreamed of this moment for months. Her sustainable housing design, the project she poured her heart into, the innovation that could provide affordable, eco-friendly homes to thousands of families, was finally being presented to potential investors who could make a reality. She sat near the middle of the table, her portfolio clutched in trembling hands, watching as the presentation began. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. The man standing at the front of the room wasn't her. It was David Morrison, the senior VP who'd barely contributed more than a few dismissive comments during her design process. And yet there he stood, his voice confident and smooth, presenting her work as if he conceived every brilliant detail himself. Maya's breath caught in her throat as slide after slide of her designs filled the screen. The innovative water reclamation system she'd spent 6 months perfecting. The modular construction approach that would cut costs by 40%. The community spaces designed to foster connection in low-income neighborhoods. Every single element was hers. Her vision, her sleepless nights, her soul translated into blueprints and renderings. The investors leaned forward, captivated. They asked questions, and David answered them with rehearsed precision, occasionally glancing at notes that Maya recognized as her own project summary. She felt the room spinning, her chest tightening with betrayal, so profound it physically hurt. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not with her entire career hanging in the balance. She tried to catch David's eye, but he deliberately avoided her gaze. Her hands moved to the edge of the table, and she opened her mouth to speak, to interrupt, to claim what was rightfully hers. But before a single word could escape, a cold voice cut through the room. "Excellent work, Morrison. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking Hartwell Enterprises is known for." Alexander Hartwell sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes focused on the presentation screen. He hadn't even glanced in Maya's direction. The man she worked under for 3 years, whose approval she'd chased through countless revisions and late-night emails, was praising someone else for her work. The CEO whose standards had pushed her to become better, whose rare moments of acknowledgement had meant everything. He was watching her dreams be stolen, and he didn't seem to care at all. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. The investors applauded. David smiled, accepting handshakes and congratulations. And Alexander Hartwell simply stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked toward the door without a single word to her. In that moment, as her revolutionary design was celebrated with her name nowhere to be found, Maya Chin made a decision. She would not let this go. She would not be silenced. And she would make them all see exactly what they'd done, no matter what it cost her. 3 years earlier, Maya Chin had walked through the glass doors of Hartwell Enterprises with stars in her eyes and a portfolio that represented 4 years of architectural school and 2 years of struggling in smaller firms. At 25, she was young, hungry, and convinced that talent would be enough. The reception area alone had taken her breath away. All clean lines, sustainable materials, and a design philosophy that spoke to everything she believed architecture could be. Her first meeting was supposed to be with the hiring manager. Instead, she found herself sitting across from Alexander Hartwell himself. He'd been reviewing her portfolio in silence for what felt like an eternity, his expression giving nothing away. Maya had studied his work in college, analyzed his buildings in graduate seminars, and admired his commitment to pushing architectural boundaries. Being in the same room with him felt surreal. Then he'd looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers, and said, "Your residential designs are technically proficient but emotionally sterile. You're designing for awards, not for people." The criticism had stung, sharp and unexpected. But Maya Chun had never been one to back down. She leaned forward, her nervousness evaporating in the face of a challenge she actually understood. "With all due respect, Mr. Hartwell, your latest commercial tower is architecturally stunning but environmentally irresponsible. You're designing for legacy, not for the planet our children will inherit." The room had fallen completely silent. Alexander's assistant, James, had actually gasped. Junior architects didn't contradict Alexander Hartwell. They certainly didn't criticize his work to his face in their first meeting. Maya had immediately wondered if she'd just destroyed her chance at the job before it even began. But then something unexpected happened. The corner of Alexander's mouth had twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He closed her portfolio, stood up, and extended his hand. "You're hired, Miss Chun. Start Monday. I want someone who challenges me, not someone who worships me." That handshake had changed everything. As their hands connected, Maya had felt a jolt of something she couldn't quite name: electricity, recognition, possibility. For just a moment, Alexander's professional mask had slipped, and she'd seen something in his eyes that looked almost like wonder. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cool composure. Over the following weeks, Maya discovered what it meant to work under Alexander Hartwell. He was demanding, exacting, and seemingly impossible to please. He'd reject her designs with minimal explanation, push her to revise concepts 7 or 8 times, and maintain a distance that felt deliberately cold. But he also assigned her to high-profile projects, stayed late to review her work personally, and pushed her harder than anyone ever had. What Maya didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that in that first meeting, when she challenged his design philosophy with fire in her eyes and conviction in her voice, Alexander Hartwell had felt something he'd never experienced in a professional setting. He'd fallen, completely and irrevocably, and every cold word, every impossible standard, every carefully maintained distance since that day had been his desperate attempt to keep those feelings buried where they belonged. Maya didn't remember walking from the conference room to Alexander's office. The fury burning through her veins had turned the world into a blur of glass and steel and bitter betrayal. Her hands were shaking as she pushed past James, Alexander's assistant, ignoring his protests about scheduled meetings and closed-door policies. None of that mattered anymore. Nothing mattered except the truth she needed to hear from the man who just watched her career get stolen without lifting a finger. Alexander was standing by his floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city as if he hadn't just destroyed her. He didn't even turn around when she slammed the door behind her. "That was my design." Her voice came out raw, trembling with an anger she'd never allowed herself to feel in his presence before. 3 years, Mr. Hartwell. 3 years I've given this company, and you let David Morrison steal my work and present it as his own. He turned slowly, his face a mask of controlled indifference that made her want to scream. "Ms. Chun, you're being dramatic. Morrison is the senior VP on that project. It's standard procedure for senior leadership to present to investors." Standard procedure? The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. He didn't contribute a single original idea. Every innovation in that design is mine. The water reclamation system, the modular construction, the community integration. I developed all of it, and you know it. Alexander's jaw tightened, but his voice remained infuriatingly calm. "You're part of a team, Ms. Chun. Individual credit isn't how this company operates. Your name will be in the project documentation." "In the documentation?" Maya laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the polished walls. Buried in footnotes, while David Morrison gets celebrated as a visionary, while investors think he's a genius behind sustainable housing. She stepped closer, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I came to you because I thought you valued innovation. I thought you believed in talent over politics. Was I wrong about everything? For just a moment, something flickered across Alexander's face. Pain, regret, something that looked almost like anguish. But it vanished so quickly Maya thought she might have imagined it. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. Let it go, Miss Chun. That's not how this company works. If you can't accept that, perhaps Hartwell Enterprises isn't the right fit for you. The words hit her like a physical blow. 3 years of late nights, of pushing herself to meet his impossible standards, of believing that maybe he saw something special in her work. All of it crumbled in that moment. Maya stared at the man she respected more than anyone in her field, and saw a stranger. Worse than a stranger. She saw someone who'd let her be diminished without a second thought. You're right, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. This isn't the right fit. Not anymore. She turned and walked toward the door, her spine straight and her head high. She didn't see the way Alexander's carefully controlled expression shattered the moment she left. She didn't see him sink into his chair, head in his hands, whispering her name like a prayer. She didn't see the folder he pulled from his locked drawer, marked confidential, filled with evidence of everything he'd been planning to do to make this right. All Maya saw was the door closing behind her, and all she felt was a burning determination that this would not be the end, not by a long shot. Maya sat in the corner booth of a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from Hartwell Enterprises, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Across from her, Sarah Mitchell, her best friend since college and now a successful employment attorney, spread documents across the table with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen this story too many times before. You have a case, Maya. A strong one. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. She'd seen the devastation in her friend's eyes when Maya had called her, barely coherent, after the disastrous presentation. Intellectual property theft, gender discrimination, hostile work environment. The evidence is clear. Your emails, your dated drafts, your project notes. Everything proves that design was yours. Maya stared at the papers without really seeing them. The thought of going to war with Alexander Hartwell felt impossible. He was a billionaire with unlimited resources and the best legal team money could buy. She was a junior architect with student loans and an apartment she could barely afford. The power imbalance was staggering. He'll destroy me, Maya whispered. Even if I win, he'll make sure I never work in architecture again. One phone call from Alexander Hartwell, and every firm in the country will blacklist me. Sarah reached across the table and took her hand. Maybe you'll show every woman in this industry that we don't have to accept this anymore. How many other people has this happened to, Maya? How many brilliant designers have had their work stolen and stayed silent because they were afraid? The question hit home. Maya thought about the other women at Hartwell Enterprises, the ones who'd warned her in whispers to keep her head down, to not make waves, to accept that this was just how things worked. She thought about the young architects who would come after her, who deserved better than a system that rewarded theft and punished excellence. I'm terrified, Maya admitted, her voice cracking. Not just of losing my career, but of, she stopped, surprised by what she'd almost said, of losing him, which was insane. Alexander Hartwell had just stood by while her work was stolen. He dismissed her pain without a second thought. So why did the idea of becoming his enemy make her chest ache? Sarah squeezed her hand tighter. You don't have to decide right now. But Maya, I've known you for 10 years. You've never backed down from a fight when you knew you were right. Don't start now just because the opponent is powerful. Maya looked down at the lawsuit papers, at her own name typed in official legal font. Maya Chun versus Hartwell Enterprises and Alexander Hartwell. The words looked surreal, impossible, terrifying. But Sarah was right. She'd spent 3 years proving herself, working harder than everyone around her, earning her place through sheer talent and determination. And in one presentation, all of that had been erased. She picked up the pen, her hand steadier than she expected. They need to know we're serious, she said quietly. And with one signature, Maya Chin declared war on the most powerful man she'd ever known, unaware that she was about to break the heart of the one person who'd been fighting for her all along. The lawsuit arrived at Alexander Hartwell's office on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who seemed entirely too cheerful for someone handing over legal documents. James, his assistant, had brought it in with trembling hands, his face pale with worry. Alexander had dismissed him with a wave, waiting until the door closed before opening the envelope that would formalize what he'd already known was coming. Maya Chun versus Hartwell Enterprises and Alexander Hartwell. The words stared back at him from the cover page, each letter a small knife to his chest. He read through the complaint slowly, methodically, noting every allegation. Intellectual property theft, gender discrimination, hostile work environment. Each charge was technically accurate from her perspective, and that knowledge sat like lead in his stomach. She had no idea at all. Alexander stood and walked to his desk, to the locked drawer he opened every night before leaving the office. Inside was a folder marked Maya Chun Confidential in his own handwriting. He pulled it out now, spreading its contents across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Evidence of his own guilt. Not for the crime she accused him of, but for loving her so completely that he'd made everything worse. There were the recommendation letters he'd written for her promotions, praising her innovative thinking and extraordinary talent. The bonus approvals he'd personally authorized, far above standard rates, because her work deserved recognition even if he couldn't give it publicly. The project assignments he'd carefully selected to showcase her abilities to the board, building her reputation behind the scenes while maintaining his cold demeanor to her face. And then there were the letters, dozens of them, handwritten on his personal stationery, never sent. Alexander picked one up, dated 6 months ago, and read his own words. Dear Maya, today you challenged me in the board meeting about the sustainability requirements for the Riverside project. You were magnificent. While everyone else nodded along with my proposal, you stood up and explained why we needed to do better. You made me want to be better. I approved your alternative design this evening. You'll find out tomorrow, and you'll probably assume it was the board's pressure. It wasn't. It was you. It's always been you. The door opened without warning, and James appeared again, looking even more distressed. Sir, I have the investigation report on the Morrison situation. You asked for it last week. Alexander looked up sharply. The investigation. He'd launched it the day after presentation, the moment he'd realized what David Morrison had done. He'd been planning to handle it quietly, to fire Morrison and elevate Maya to lead architect on the sustainable housing project before the end of the month. He'd wanted to give her the recognition she deserved without it looking like favoritism, without anyone questioning whether she'd earned it. What did you find? Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer. Morrison deliberately took credit for Ms. Chen's work. The evidence is conclusive. I have his emails admitting he knew the design was hers. James hesitated. Sir, what do you want to do with this? Alexander looked down at the lawsuit, then at the folder of secrets he'd kept for 3 years. Send it to our legal team. And James? I need you to pull every piece of documentation showing my advocacy for Maya Chin over the past 3 years. Everything. His voice was quiet, resigned. She's going to need to see the truth, even if she never believes why I kept it from her. The law office conference room felt sterile and cold, nothing like the soaring spaces Maya had spent her career designing. She sat beside Sarah, trying to project confidence she didn't feel, while across the table Alexander Hartwell sat flanked by 2 attorneys in suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. This was the first deposition, the beginning of a legal process that would lay bare every detail of her 3 years at Hartwell Enterprises. Alexander looked different somehow. The usual commanding presence was still there, but something in his eyes seemed dimmed, almost haunted. He hadn't looked directly at her since entering the room, keeping his gaze fixed on the documents in front of him or on the attorneys conducting the proceeding. Maya told herself she didn't care, that his discomfort was justice, but a traitorous part of her heart ached at the distance between them. Sarah began the questioning with professional precision, establishing timeline and context. When had Maya started at Hartwell Enterprises? What projects had she worked on? What was her relationship with the defendant? Each answer was recorded by the court reporter, building a foundation for the case. Then came the harder questions, the ones that made Maya's voice shake despite her determination to remain composed. Can you describe the working environment under Mr. Hartwell's supervision? Demanding, Maya answered carefully. He had extremely high standards. Projects were often rejected multiple times before approval. He rarely offered praise or acknowledgement. One of Alexander's attorneys made a note, but he did approve your work eventually, correct? You were never actually prevented from completing projects. That's not the point, Maya said, frustration bleeding into her voice. The point is that my final design for the Sustainable Housing Initiative was stolen and presented by someone else, and Mr. Hartwell did nothing to stop it. For the first time, Alexander's eyes met hers. The look lasted only a second, but Maya saw something that confused her, not anger or defensiveness, but pain, raw and unguarded. Then he looked away, his jaw tight. Sarah pushed forward, presenting evidence. Emails, project files, dated drafts, all proving Maya's authorship of the design. But then something unexpected emerged from the discovery documents. Recommendation letters Alexander had written for Maya's advancement. Performance reviews praising her innovative approach and technical excellence. Bonus authorizations well above standard rates. Ms. Chun, Alexander's lead attorney said smoothly, were you aware that Mr. Hartwell had personally recommended you for the Junior Design of the Year award 2 years running? Maya's breath caught. No, I didn't win either year. But he recommended you. Wrote extensive justifications for why you deserve recognition. The attorney slid documents across the table. Were you aware that he personally approved a 20% bonus for your work on the Fletcher project? Maya stared at the papers, her mind reeling. She'd received the bonus, yes, but she'd assumed it was standard. Everyone got bonuses on successful projects, didn't they? I thought that was normal procedure. It was triple the standard rate for junior architects, the attorney said. Approved by Mr. Hartwell personally. Sarah touched Maya's arm gently, a silent communication. They'd review this later, in private. But Maya couldn't stop staring at Alexander's signature on the documents. Couldn't stop wondering what else she didn't know. Across the table, Alexander sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable, while Maya's entire understanding of the past 3 years began to crack and shift beneath her. Maya's apartment had become a war room. Documents covered every surface of her small dining table, spreading onto the floor in carefully organized piles. Sarah sat cross-legged on the carpet, reading through depositions while Maya paced back and forth, unable to sit still as they reviewed the discovered materials that had arrived that afternoon. This doesn't make sense, Maya said for the third time, holding up another document. Why would he write a recommendation for me to lead the Riverside Commons project if he was trying to hold me back? Sarah looked up from the page she was reading, her expression troubled. Maya, you need to see this. She held out a memo dated 18 months earlier. Alexander personally created a professional development fund. Look at who the sole recipient was. Maya took the paper, her eyes scanning the formal language until she found her own name. A fund of $50,000, allocated specifically for her continued education, conference attendance, and skill development. She'd attended 2 conferences in the past year, both fully paid, and had assumed the company covered such expenses for all employees. But this document made it clear the fund was created specifically for her, approved and funded by Alexander Hartwell himself. There's more, Sarah said quietly, pulling out another stack of papers. Project assignments. Every single high-profile project you've worked on in the past 3 years, he personally selected you for them. Look at these internal emails to the senior partners. He's advocating for you constantly, arguing why you should be given opportunities usually reserved for senior architects. Maya sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. She remembered the Anderson Tower project. How surprised she'd been when Alexander assigned her as second lead despite her junior status. She'd worked herself to exhaustion on that project, determined to prove she deserved the opportunity. And she'd succeeded. The tower had won awards, and her contributions had been noted in architectural journals. But she'd never known that Alexander had fought to give her that chance. Why? Maya whispered, more to herself than to Sarah. If he believed in me, if he was advocating for me behind the scenes, then why did he let Morrison steal my design? Why did he look me in the eye and tell me to let it go? Sarah was quiet for a moment, sorting through more documents. I don't know, but Maya, look at the dates on these recommendations, these memos, these approvals. They're consistent, spanning all 3 years. Whatever happened with Morrison, it doesn't fit the pattern. Alexander has been building your career from the shadows this entire time. Maya picked up another document. This one a performance review from her first year. Alexander's handwriting filled the margins with notes. Exceptional spatial reasoning. Innovative approach to sustainability challenges. Hire more designers like Chun. Her vision blurred with unexpected tears. She spent 3 years believing Alexander Hartwell saw her as just another junior architect, someone to be tolerated and occasionally criticized. She'd endured his cold demeanor, his impossible standards, his seeming indifference, never knowing that behind closed doors he was fighting for her advancement at every turn. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. I need to know the truth, Maya said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. Not just about Morrison and the stolen design. I need to understand why Alexander would do all of this and never say a word. Because none of this makes sense, Sarah. None of it. The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon, while Maya was still reeling from the discovery documents. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was warm and familiar. Dean Patricia Rodriguez from Maya's alma mater, the woman who'd encouraged her to pursue architecture when she'd been an uncertain freshman. Maya, I'm calling with wonderful news, Dean Rodriguez said, her enthusiasm palpable even through the phone. We're featuring the Maya Chin Scholarship in our annual donor recognition publication, and we'd love to include a statement from you about what this program means. Maya's apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I'm sorry, what scholarship? There was a pause. The Maya Chin Scholarship for Women in Architecture. It was established 2 years ago by an anonymous donor. Full tuition, room, and board for underprivileged young women pursuing architecture degrees. We've awarded it to 6 students so far, Maya. These young women are changing their lives because someone believed in honoring your work. 2 years ago, Maya's mind raced backward through time. 2 years ago, she'd been working on the Fletcher project, pulling all-nighters, proving herself on one of the firm's most challenging designs. 2 years ago, Alexander had barely spoken to her except to critique her work. Dean Rodriguez, I don't know anything about this scholarship. Are you sure it's in my name? Absolutely certain. The paperwork is quite specific. The donor wanted it named after you. Said you represented everything the scholarship was meant to celebrate: talent, determination, and innovation despite obstacles. Maya's hands trembled as she ended the call and immediately opened her laptop. It took 3 hours of research, following digital breadcrumbs through university records and corporate filings, before she found it. A charitable contribution from Hartwell Enterprises, routed through a private foundation, establishing a scholarship fund. And there, buried in the documentation, was Alexander Hartwell's signature as the approving executive. He'd created a scholarship in her name. While she thought he barely noticed her existence, he'd been honoring her legacy, investing in the future of women like her. Maya stared at the screen until the words blurred, her entire world shifting once again beneath her feet. The package arrived on Saturday morning, delivered by a courier service Maya didn't recognize. Her name and address were handwritten on the label, but there was no return address, only a Hartwell Enterprises logo stamped in the corner. Maya signed for it with growing confusion, carrying the medium-sized box to her kitchen table. Inside, wrapped in plain brown paper, was a wooden box with brass hinges. Beautiful, clearly expensive, and completely inexplicable. Maya lifted the lid slowly, and her breath stopped. Letters, dozens of them, maybe more, all on heavy cream stationery with Alexander Hartwell's personal letterhead. Each envelope was addressed to her in handwriting she recognized from the marginal notes on her project reviews. Strong, precise, unmistakably his. Her hands shook as she opened the first one. Dated 3 years ago, just weeks after she'd started at Hartwell Enterprises. Dear Maya, today you challenged me in front of the entire design team about the environmental impact of the Lexington project. You were right, and I was too proud to admit it in the moment. I approved your alternative approach this evening. You'll never know it was because of you. You'll think I came to the conclusion myself. But it was you. It's always been you. You walk into rooms and make them brighter. You look at problems and see possibilities. And I am completely, hopelessly lost. Maya's vision blurred with tears as she reached for another letter, this one from a year ago. Dear Maya, I stayed late tonight to review your work, but really I stayed because the office feels empty when you're not here. Today I wanted to tell you that your design for the community center was brilliant, that you have a gift for creating spaces that heal people. Instead, I criticize your material choices. I push you hard because I see in you what you don't yet see in yourself. Greatness that could change this entire industry. But I'm a coward. I hide behind professionalism and impossible standards because loving you from a distance is safer than risking everything to tell you the truth. Letter after letter, spanning 3 years. Admiration, longing, respect, love. All the things he'd never said to her face, poured onto pages he'd never intended her to see. Maya read until her tears made the ink blur, until her hands cramped from gripping the paper too tightly, until she understood with devastating clarity that every cold word, every harsh critique, every moment of distance had been Alexander Hartwell's desperate attempt to protect them both from feelings that could destroy everything. And now those feelings were laid bare before her, and she had no idea what to do with the truth. The mediation was scheduled for Monday morning in a neutral law office downtown. Maya had barely slept since the letters arrived, her mind spinning with revelations that had shattered everything she thought she knew. Sarah had advised her to focus, to stay professional, to remember why they were there. But as Maya sat across from Alexander in the conference room, all her carefully prepared composure evaporated. The mediator droned on about procedures and expectations, but Maya wasn't listening. She was watching Alexander, noting the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. When the mediator suggested a brief recess and the lawyer stepped out to make phone calls, Maya and Alexander were left alone. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 3 years of unspoken words. Why didn't you just tell me? Maya's voice cracked, all her anger and confusion pouring into those 6 words. Alexander's eyes met hers, and the carefully maintained professional mask finally shattered. Because you deserve better than your boss confessing feelings. You deserved respect, opportunity, equality, not some powerful man making your career complicated with his emotions. So you made my life hell instead? Maya stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You pushed me away, criticized everything I did, maintained this cold distance while writing me love letters you never had the courage to send. I made you stronger. Alexander rose too, his own composure breaking. Every impossible standard, every rejected design, every challenge I threw at you. I was giving you the tools to surpass me, to become so undeniably brilliant that no one could ever question whether you earned your success. I was building your armor, Maya. I didn't need armor, Alexander. I needed honesty. Tears streamed down Maya's face now, unchecked. And the Morrison situation, you were investigating it, planning to fix it, doing everything behind the scenes again instead of just telling me the truth. Because I wanted you to have the victory on your own terms. His voice rose, raw with emotion. I was going to fire him, promote you, give you everything you deserved. But I wanted to look like merit, not favoritism. I wanted the world to see your genius without anyone whispering that you only succeeded because the CEO loved you. The word hung in the air between them. Loved. Present tense. Not past. Maya's breath caught as Alexander continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I loved you wrong, Maya. I tried to save you when what you needed was for me to stand beside you and fight with you. I'm sorry. Alexander Hartwell called an emergency press conference for Tuesday morning against the vehement advice of every attorney on his legal team. They'd argued, threatened to quit, warned him of the liability he was creating. But Alexander had spent 3 years hiding the truth, and he was done with silence. The media room at Hartwell Enterprises headquarters was packed with journalists, cameras, and curious employees who'd heard whispers of something unprecedented about to happen. Maya watched from her apartment, Sarah beside her on the couch, as a live stream loaded on her laptop. Her heart hammered in her chest as Alexander stepped to the podium, looking directly into the camera with an expression of absolute resolve. "Thank you for coming on short notice," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I'm here to correct a grave injustice that occurred within my company, and to acknowledge a truth that should have been public from the beginning." He paused, and Maya could see him gathering himself for what came next. The Hartwell Sustainable Housing Initiative, the design that has been attributed to David Morrison, was created entirely by Maya Chun, a junior architect in my firm. Every innovative element, every sustainable feature, every detail that has earned praise from this industry belongs to her. The room erupted with questions, cameras flashing, but Alexander held up his hand. "I'm not finished. Effective immediately, David Morrison is terminated from Hartwell Enterprises for intellectual property theft. Ms. Chun is promoted to lead architect and partner, with full equity and decision-making authority. Her name will be on every piece of documentation, every presentation, every award related to this project." Maya's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely now. On screen, Alexander's expression softened slightly as he continued. "I've spent 3 years trying to protect someone who never needed my protection. Maya Chun is the most talented architect I've ever worked with. She's brilliant, innovative, and fearless. And she deserves recognition not because I'm giving it to her, but because she earned it through her own extraordinary ability." He looked directly into the camera then, and Maya felt as if he were speaking only to her. "I've made many mistakes in how I've handled this situation and how I've treated Ms. Chun. But the biggest mistake would be continuing to let the world believe that her genius belongs to anyone but herself. Maya Chun is the future of this company and this industry, and it's time everyone knew it." The press conference dissolved into chaos, but Maya barely heard it. Sarah was talking, saying something about strategy and next steps, but all Maya could focus on was a man on her screen who just sacrificed his reputation to give her back her dignity. Maya found Alexander on the rooftop of the Hartwell building that evening, standing at the edge where the city lights sprawled beneath him like a constellation fallen to earth. He didn't turn when she approached, but she saw his shoulders tense, as if he'd been waiting for her and dreading her arrival in equal measure. "You didn't have to do that," Maya said quietly, stepping beside him at the railing. "Yes, I did. You were right about everything." His voice was rough, exhausted. "I was trying to save you instead of empowering you. I was making decisions for you instead of with you. I was so afraid of abusing my position that I created a different kind of harm." They stood in silence for a moment, the autumn wind cool against their faces. Maya thought about the letters, the scholarship, the behind-the-scenes advocacy. She thought about 3 years of mixed signals and hidden truths, of a love so profound it had twisted itself into something neither of them could recognize. "I fell in love with you the day you told me my design was aesthetically impressive but environmentally ignorant," Alexander said, still not looking at her. "You were 25 years old, in your first real interview, and you had the courage to tell a billionaire CEO that he was wrong. I knew in that moment that you were going to change everything." Maya's breath caught. "I fell in love with you when you stayed until 3 a.m. helping me fix the Fletcher Project crisis, then pretended the next day that you'd just been passing by the office." She turned to face him. "You brought me coffee. You knew exactly how I took it, even though you'd never asked." Alexander finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything. The fear, the hope, the love he'd tried so desperately to contain. "So what now?" he asked. "You have every right to continue the lawsuit, to walk away from Hartwell Enterprises, and build your career anywhere else. I'll give you the best recommendation anyone has ever written. I'll make sure every firm in the country knows your genius." Maya took a step closer. "Or we could start over. As equals. As partners." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "I'm dropping the lawsuit, Alexander. Not because of the press conference or the partnership, but because I finally understand what you were trying to do, even if you did it all wrong." His fingers intertwined with hers, and for the first time in 3 years, there were no walls between them. I love you, Maya-chun, and I promise to never hide that truth again. I love you, too, she whispered. Now, let's build something beautiful together. The building stood against the autumn sky, like a promise fulfilled, all clean lines and sustainable materials, with community spaces that welcome light and life into every corner. Maya-chun had designed it as her masterpiece, a structure that honored both form and function, beauty and purpose. And today, it would serve as the setting for the most important moment of her life. Inside the main atrium, friends and family gathered in seats arranged along an aisle Maya had designed herself. The space was filled with the people who'd witnessed their journey. Colleagues from Hartwell Enterprises who'd watched two adversaries become partners. Friends who'd supported them through the complicated transition from courtroom enemies to collaborators to lovers. Sarah sat in the front row as maid of honor, occasionally wiping tears she'd sworn she wouldn't shed. Maya stood in the preparation room, smoothing her dress and looking at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was different from the terrified junior architect who'd filed a lawsuit 2 years ago. She was a partner at Hartwell Enterprises now, her name on the door, her designs changing skylines across the country. But more than that, she was someone who'd learned to demand her worth, to fight for justice, and to recognize love even when it came wrapped in complicated mistakes. "Ready?" her father asked, offering his arm. Maya nodded, her heart full. As the music began and the doors opened, she saw Alexander waiting at the end of the aisle she designed. He looked handsome in his suit, but what took her breath away was the expression on his face. Pure, unguarded love. No more masks. No more walls. Just a truth they'd finally learned to speak. She walked toward him, past the colleagues who become friends, past the sketches of their joint projects displayed on easels, past James the assistant who was crying openly and claiming allergies. When she reached Alexander, he took her hands in his, and she saw tears in his eyes too. The ceremony was beautiful, but Maya would later remember only fragments. The way Alexander's voice shook when he promised to empower rather than protect, to communicate rather than hide, to love her as the equal she'd always been. The way her own vows acknowledged that they'd found each other through conflict, that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the courage to demand better. When they were pronounced married and Alexander kissed her, the atrium erupted in applause. But Maya was focused only on the man before her, the one who'd loved her so much he'd nearly lost her, who'd learned that true love means standing beside someone, not in front of them. Later, at the reception, James would joke about the accidental letter delivery that had changed everything. Sarah would give a toast about justice and second chances. And Maya and Alexander would dance in the building she created, surrounded by the life they'd built together. Two people who'd learned that the hardest battles sometimes lead to the most beautiful victories. As the evening settled over the celebration, Maya and Alexander stood together on the building's observation deck, watching the city lights flicker to life below them. Their guests continued celebrating inside, but they'd stolen this quiet moment, just the two of them, to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. Maya-chun had sued her billionaire boss and found justice. But more than that, she'd found her voice, her power, and a love that had learned to speak the truth. She discovered that demanding what you deserve isn't just about winning. It's about refusing to accept less than your worth, even when the cost seems impossibly high. Alexander Hartwell had learned the hardest lesson of all, that loving someone means empowering them, not protecting them from the world. That good intentions without honest communication create their own kind of harm. That true partnership requires vulnerability, even when vulnerability feels terrifying. Together, they built something neither could have created alone. Their architectural firm was thriving, their relationship was honest, and the scholarship in Maya's name was changing lives. The sustainable housing project that had started everything now bore both their names, a testament to what's possible when two brilliant minds work as true equals. Behind them, through the windows, they could see their wedding guests dancing and laughing. Ahead of them lay years of building, creating, and loving, not perfectly, but honestly. Sometimes the person you're fighting is actually fighting for you. And sometimes the greatest love stories start with the courage to demand what you deserve. Maya leaned into Alexander's embrace as the city sparkled below. Two people who'd found their way from courtroom enemies to soulmates, proof that even the most complicated journeys can lead to beautiful destinations. If this story moved you, please subscribe so you never miss another tale of courage and unexpected love. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Maya's position? Would you have sued, or would you have walked away? And if you know someone who needs to remember their worth, someone who's fighting their own battle for recognition and respect, share this story with them. Because everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and loved exactly as they are. Thank you for being part of this journey with us.